Well, hello, everyone. Welcome to this 58th webinar on the Secret Doctrine. People are still coming in. I'm going to admit Ann Parker being a favorite of mine. Hello, everyone. So this webinar series, as you well know by now, is available on makara.us under the subheadings Moria Federation, webinars, then webinar series in progress. All episodes of this, the Secret Teachings of All Ages webinars, and the Treatise on Cosmic Fire series are also available on YouTube. Just do a search for Francis Donald and the webinar series you'd like to view. Okay, this month in our reading of Old Diary Leaves, we'll learn about the Kolum missionary conspiracy against HPB and the Theosophical movement in India, which was to plague HPB for the rest of her life and Theosophy in general, right up to the present time. So to gain some insight on this conspiracy, we have to understand the toxic, hateful attitude of the missionaries who were trying to eradicate Hinduism and Buddhism towards Theosophists who were championing these native beliefs. For example, even years after HPB's death, we find the Christian Literature Society based in Madras informing its adherents of Madame Blavatsky's quote unquote tricks and dupes, followed by the supposed collapse of the master Kut Humi. Okay, so could we get a reader, please?
I'll start you off.
Great.
On the 10th day of September, 1884, the first growl of the coming tempest was heard, for we received from Adyar a lugubrious letter from Damodar, intimating that the missionaries were hatching a plot, evidently with the help of Mademoiselle Kolum. He said that this woman was going about here and there, breathing vengeance against HPB and the society. The members of the board of control, to which I had confided the management of our affairs at the headquarters, became so tired of her and her wretched gossip that they tried to get her and her husband to go to Colorado, where Dr. Hartman offered to present them with a gold mine claim of his. They were both willing and anxious to go, and a day for their sailing via Hong Kong and San Francisco had been agreed upon, when they spoiled everything by saying that they held compromising letters of HPB's, and that if they did not receive a bonus of 3,000 rupees, they should give the letter for publication. Of course, that stopped all negotiation. The board held a meeting to which the accused were summoned. Affidavits of their slanders were read in their presence, and they were expelled from membership in the society.
Okay, next reader.
Yvonne, can you read that, please?
Sure. Then came a wrangle and contention about their quitting our premises, they contending that Madame Blavatsky had left her rooms in their custody, and that they should not leave Adyar until an order was received from her to that effect. Under advice of counsel, the board wrote and cabled HPB to send the required order. She cabled it back, and at length, after weeks of most disagreeable disturbance, the worthy couple were turned out of the compound and went and settled themselves at Saint Thome in a house provided for them by the gentle, Christ-like missionaries. Their bombshell mortar battery was fired off in the September number of their Madras organ, the Christian College magazine, And then they stood by to see the superstructure of the Theosophical Society crumble and bury its founders beneath the ruins. No reasonable person was deceived by the pretense that the employment of the self-discredited Coulombs as tools to attempt our ruin was in the interest of public morals. The partisan spirit underneath the attack shone clearly through. If it had been a question of attacking the leaders of one of the sects of their own religion, it is very doubtful if the interests of public morals would not have left them to take care of themselves. But when the chance of discrediting the society, which of all others had the strongest hold upon the confidence of the Indian peoples, offered itself, the temptation was irresistible. And even such unsavory accomplices as these were paid their price, partly in cash, partly in promises. And the Reverend Mr. Alexander is said to have served as their literary chef de cuisine, very ably too.
Thank you. And next reader.
Vivian, can you read that for us, please?
Naturally enough, so sensational an article achieved instant notoriety. The Calcutta correspondent of the Times cabled its substance to that paper on September the 20th, and it very soon became known throughout the whole civilized world. Only by the reaction was it now seen how widespread the interest in our views had become, and it is doubtful if any society had ever before had to sustain so terrible an attack. It almost seemed as if the very reactive bitterness of public denunciations of Madame Blavatsky was the strongest proof of the deep impression which her revelations of the existence of the Eastern school of adepts, their individual characters and spiritual attainments, and the part they play in the progress of our race, had made on the public mind. Though I have traced the development of this conspiracy to its culmination within a single paragraph, weeks passed between our first warning from Damodar and the appearance of the Calcutta dispatches in the Times. These were weeks of painful anxiety to us and others, but to HPB herself of strong mental agony. Her supersensitive temperament made her suffer mental tortures proportionate to the length of her enforced inaction. What HPB could do under the circumstances, she did. She wrote to the Times of October the 9th, denouncing the alleged private letters of herself to Madame Coulon as forgeries, and in published interviews in the Pall Mall and other journals, declared her intention of returning to India and prosecuting the Coulons and the missionaries for libel.
Okay, thank you. To be continued. So, moving into our material. Last month, this is a little bit of review here, referencing HPB's statement, had the ancients been ignorant of the heterogeneity of their elements, they would have had no personifications of fire, air, water, earth, and ether. So referencing this statement, we did a little mini tutorial, and we read about those gods and goddesses from Egypt, India, and Greece who personify the elements of fire, air, and water. And these are just some examples from those. It was not by any means a complete survey, but gave us some idea of that, of the personification of these various elements. So we start today with the final statement in this passage, which reads, fire, a terra incognita to this day to modern science, which is obliged to call it motion, evolution of light and heat, state of ignition, defining it by its outward aspects in short, and remaining ignorant of its nature. So 134 years later, after the publication of SD, Secret Doctrine, fire is still defined by its outer aspects. I took a look at a few definitions, and typical is the Cambridge Dictionary definition, which tells that fire is, ready for this, the state of burning that produces flames that send out heat and light and might produce smoke. That's their definition of fire. Even Wikipedia, and this was the most astute definition I could find, it still defines fire in accordance with its outer phenomena, what can be seen. Fire is the rapid oxidation of a material, fuel, in the exothermic chemical process of combustion, releasing heat, light, and various reaction products. At a certain point in the combustion reaction, called the ignition point, flames are produced. So it sounds much more scientific, but exothermic, for instance, just means the release of heat. So this type of definition, coupled with a widespread absolute belief in exoteric science, veils the fact that that which lies behind the outer phenomenon called fire is as much a mystery to physical science as it has ever been, and that fire's true source can only be found through a study of esoteric science. So to that end, and since it's such a fundamental theosophical concept, I'd like to do a mini tutorial on this subject, courtesy of the Theosophical Glossary. So could we get a reader for this? This is the beginning of the 4 slides.
Karen, can you read that for us, please?
Did you say Karen?
Yes, please.
Okay. Fire has been venerated in all ages as the symbol of spirit as opposed to matter. Its essence or substance is spirit, with essential or substantial air or water considered as primordial elements. It becomes soul. With the further addition of the element earth, it becomes animated bodies because ensouled and enlivened with the attributes and qualities of the preceding more ethereal elements. Great importance was attached in ancient times to keeping alive the sacred fires of health and altar.
Hearth.
In what?
Hearth and altar. Yeah. Like the hearth. Yeah, not health, but hearth.
Oh, hearth. I'm sorry.
Yeah, no problem.
And in all this, it was recognized that terrestrial fire is the representative of celestial fire, a phase of cosmic consciousness. Deity is often spoken of as the cosmic fire of consciousness.
Okay, so these folks here aren't just warming themselves, in a nice outdoor fire. This is actual worship through the physical flames of the essence of fire. Okay, next up.
Scott, can you read that for us, please?
The ancient conception of fire thus embraced far more than the ordinary view of fire as chemical combustion or one of its phenomena. Among all the older peoples, fire was multitudinous in both characteristics and attributes, ranging from divine spiritual intellectuality to all intermediate states of its manifestations, to the physical heat arising from the burning of materials such as wood or the natural heat of the body. It is for this reason that certain ancient philosophers, such as Heraclitus, spoke of fire as the primordial element of the universe, in close accord with their archaic outlook.
So it's not just modern theosophy that developed this concept of primordial fire, right? This substands many of the ancient belief systems. And next.
Prudy, can you read that for us, please?
Fire is the active, energetic, vitalizing, quickening principle on all planes. It is often paired with water as spirit and form, contrasted with earth as celestial and terrestrial. Air is spoken of as its vehicle, as is also ether, because the root of cosmic ether is the celestial fire. The order of the elements varies from different points of view and on different planes of manifestation. The Secret Doctrine states that from primordial chaos came forth a fire that was called formless and luminous, essential consciousness, substance. The first manifested hot fires and flames issued at a much later stage in manifestation. Concealed within the central sun is a triple formless invisible fire, which precedes the septenary manifested fires of cosmos. Fire, whether heavenly or terrestrial, is the most perfect and pure reflection of the one universal flame. It is life and death, creator and recreator, the origin and the end of every material thing, divine consciousness, substance. From one flame all lamps can be kindled. Fire imparts infinitely without loss. Fire alone is one, on the plane of the one reality, and on the plane of illusion, its particles are fiery lives.
Thank you. And finally, a reader, and including the caption, please.
Martha, can you read that for us, please?
Yes. Fire has its nether pole, and hence its internal aspect.
Infernal.
Infernal, thank you. But the fires of hell are purificatory. By his power of self-conscious choice, an individual may set himself at variance with nature's processes, thus creating his own devils. Fire was the great agent of purification in medieval alchemy, for it removes the dross from the gold. The same is true on the moral plane, for spiritual aspiration calls down an inner fire that purifies the gold from the dross in the aspirant's heart. The two births of baptisms relate to water and fire, the former being carnal, the latter being the spiritual birth or baptism that comes to the aspirant.
Okay, and the caption, please.
Mongolian fire ceremonies, shamans, it is believed, are chosen by their ancestral spirits to be a bridge to the living world and provide healing and advice. The image is by Kevin Freyer.
Thank you, Martha.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, and all this is from the online Theosophical Glossary. Fabulous source. I've talked about it before in their reference to fire. Any thoughts or questions about this? All righty. Next up, could we get a reader?
Pam, can you read that for us, please?
So, but that which, okay.
Go ahead.
Yes, but that which modern science seems to fail to perceive is that, differentiated as may have been those simple chemical atoms, which archaic philosophy called the creators of their respective parents, fathers, brothers, husbands of their mothers, and those mothers the daughters of their own sons, like Aditi and Daksha, for example, differentiated as these elements were in the beginning still. They were not the compound bodies known to science as they are now, neither water, air, earth, synonym for solid generally, existed in their present form, representing the three states of matter alone, recognized by science. For all these are the productions already recombined by the atmospheres of globes completely formed, even to fire, so that in the first periods of the Earth's formation, they were something quite sui
generis.
Sui generis.
Yeah, sui generis means unique or literally of its own kind. So he's just telling us that that each of these recombined qualities were unique. We'll get into that. So the concept of noumenal chemical atoms is a profound study to which this passage, hang on a second, I got ahead of myself. So first, but that which modern science seems to fail to perceive is that differentiated as may have been those simple chemical atoms. So we'll discuss that. The concept of noumenal chemical atoms is a profound and advanced study to which this passage from later in the Secret Doctrine serves as a good introduction. So let's go ahead and read that. I'll read the caption here. The 5 dhyani buddhis correspond to the 5 noumenal elements, with the central akshobhya representing ether. So here's this great akshobhya buddhi representing ether, and then each of these 4 in the corners represent the 4 known elements of fire, air, earth, and water. So can we get a reader, please?
Eleonora, can you read that for us, please?
Sure. Modern chemistry, owing to observation and discovery, should have unconsciously been forced to adopt and recognize the same ratio of progression and order in the evolution of chemical atoms as occultism does, both for its Dhyanis and atoms, analogy being its first law. As seen above, the very first group of the Rupa angels is quaternary, an element being added to each in descending order. So are the atoms, adopting the phraseology of chemistry, monatomic, diatomic, and tetratomic, progressing downwards. Let it be remembered that fire, water, and air, or the elements of primary creation, so-called, are not the compound elements they are on Earth, but nominal, homogeneous elements, the spirits thereof. Then follow the septenary groups or hosts, placed on a parallel line in a diagram with atoms. The natures of those beings would be seen to correspond in their downward scale of progression to composite elements in a mathematically identical manner. As to analogy, this refers, of course, only to diagrams made by the occultists, for were the scale of angelic beings to be placed on a parallel line with the scale of chemical atoms of science, from the hypothetical helium down to uranium, they would of course be found to differ, for these have, as correspondents on the astral plane, only the 4 lowest orders, the higher 3 principles in the atom, or rather molecule or chemical element, being perceptible only to the initiate's Dengma's eye. In esoteric philosophy, every physical particle corresponds to and depends on its higher nomenon, the being to whose essence it belongs, and above as below, the spiritual evolves from the divine, the psychomental from the spiritual, tainted from its lower plane by the astral. The whole animated and seemingly inanimate nature evolving on parallel lines,
and drawing its attributes from above as well from below.
Thank you. Interesting, even startling is the statement, placed on parallel lines in a diagram with atoms, the natures of those beings would be seen to correspond in their downward scale of progression to composite elements in a mathematically identical manner. How cool it would be to see that chart. Okay. Any questions about this, by the way? So it's really an extraordinary passage, and there's, we could spend a lot of time here, but we need to stay with the primary text. But this sense of the occult science of the progression of the dhyanis being as it is with the atoms, right, is really extraordinary. Okay. So next up, which archaic philosophy called the creators of their respective parents, fathers, brothers, husbands, or mothers, and those mothers, the daughters of their own son. This can be very confusing, and we've talked about this before. So the idea of sons and daughters being the creators of their parents is a symbolic way of saying that the same primordial Shakti or divine creative energy drives all the outer manifestations of that energy, whether that manifestation is a mother, a father, a son, a daughter. It's the same fundamental Shakti that animates that. We explored this concept when considering the Hindu Vash or voice, which is mother, wife, and daughter to the logos, because the same primordial sound in different variations created the logos, that's the mother, is the creative potential of the logos, his wife, and is the creative expression of the logos, his daughter. HPB says, the mother of mercy and knowledge is called the triple of Quan Shai Yin because in her correlations, metaphysical and cosmical, she is the mother, the wife, and the daughter of the logos. Just as in the later theological translations, she became the Father, Son, and the female Holy Ghost. The Shakti or energy, the essence of the three. It is this inner essence that is the, quote, creator of their respective parents. For essence stands beyond time and space, and yet pervades all. Any thoughts or questions about this? Can be, if you see this in terms of sequence and in time and space, it makes no sense, right? But if you recognize that from out of time and space, the essential essence just is, right? And that it pervades all demonstrations of that essence. Okay, next, like Aditi and Daksha, for example. So these are examples of this concept. Okay, Aditi, the highest Akasha, is the mother aspect, the cosmic matrix from which all creation emerges. Daksha, as the father aspect, is a synthesis and aggregate of all terrestrial progenitors. The Rig Veda says that Daksha sprang from Aditi and Aditi from Daksha, referencing the cycle of rebirth of the same dual essence in different stages of manifestation. Is it starting to become clear? I hope so. Okay, next up, differentiated as these elements were in the beginning, still, they were not the compound bodies known to science as they are now. More specifically, from what we just read, fire, water, and air, or the elements of primary creation, so-called, are not the compound elements they are on Earth, but noumenal, homogeneous elements, the spirits thereof. And finally, we have neither water, air, earth, synonym for solids generally, existed in their present form, representing the three states of matter alone recognized by science, for all these are the productions already recombined by the atmospheres of globes completely formed, even to fire, so that in the first periods of the Earth's formation, they were something quite sui generis, that means unique. Okay, HPB here suggests that though the noumenal essence of the elements has always remained the same, their outer composition is on each globe, let alone each round and chain, not only different, but specifically progressive. For example, water on globe C is not at all the same as water on our globe D, right? And would in fact be more akin to, but not identical with, the substance on our globe D's astral plane. Furthermore, the higher subjective counterparts of the elements form an essential part of the triple nature of the human constitution, with specific variations of these elements found on the Atmic, Buddhic, and monastic planes. This passage from second volume of the Secret Doctrine expands on this idea. I know this is this gets really abstract, but it's a fundamental concept to understanding the triple nature of the human constitution. Can we get a reader for this, please?
Robert, can you read that for us, please?
Why had they, the first and second root races, no fire or water of their own? Because that which is hydrogen to the elements and gases on the objective plane, its noumenon, is in the world of mental or subjective phenomena, since its trinitarian latent nature is mirrored in its three active emanations from the three higher principles in man, namely spirit, soul, and mind, or Atma, Buddhi, and Manas. It, objective and subjective hydrogen, forms therefore the spiritual as well as the material human basis. Rudimentary man, having been nursed by the air or the wind, becomes the perfect man later on.
Okay,
that's
thanks.
a model of a hydrogen atom.
Yeah. So key here, and somewhat of an eyebrow riser, is the objective and spiritual hydrogen forms, therefore, the spiritual as well as the material human basis. I mean, this is not how we normally think of the composition of our higher principles, right? And therefore, she follows by saying, having been nursed on air, which is, of course, made up by hydrogen or the wind, becomes the perfect man later on, suggesting that it's exposure to the hydrogen element that actually is responsible for lifting us into our soul and spirit aspects. Very radical concept. Any thoughts or questions about this?
Robert, go ahead. You've got your hand up.
Thank you. This whole question of what is fire is very, very difficult and profound, because that, for example, the flame that the people in India were sitting and worshiping by, that's not even fire. It's like the physical fire is the etheric fire. So etheric fire, solar fire,
Yeah.
And electric fire. It's not even fire in a strange way. It's almost like it needs another word. Maybe you call it pranos, I don't know, but fire is it's amazing. I mean, how complex that thing is. We look at the fire and we think we understand it's analogous, but is it? You know, what does it really mean? You know,
Yeah, you're looking at the form aspect of this extraordinary thing that is fire. But in fact, fire itself is the form aspect on a higher level of flame. Now that's according to theosophy, you know, that flame is the true essence that demonstrates as fire, right? So we have, for instance, on the highest subplane of the cosmic physical plane, you have the sea of fire. Well, it is the physical plane, right? The cosmic physical plane. When you go beyond the cosmic physical, then you move into the realm of flame, especially at cosmic mental levels. So yeah, it is a fascinating study, and it's the most primordial example of the life within the outer form. You know, when you look at fire, at whatever level, you know, the fire of mind, you know, fire is the element of the monastic. So there's something connected. It's also this idea of the serpent power is very connected with fire, you know, on a monastic level.
so we're talking about, we're using words to describe something that we all experience our thoughts and the thoughts of others, but we don't experience them, at least most of us, I don't think, experience them in terms of any kind of fiery substance. So, it's obviously something, you know, we see the title, Treatise on Cosmic Fire, and
yeah, there you have
we're
it.
clueless. I'm clueless, you know, of what.
Yeah, well, you know, that's the first good step, is to recognize you're clueless. You know, I have to laugh when I read these glib definitions of fire in, you know, you just grab any dictionary, look up fire, as, you know, as if that is fire at all, you know.
Right.
You know, that it's strictly descriptions of the outer demonstration of fire, you know. And
yeah, they're so circular. It's like saying,
it is
what is
circular.
fire? Fire is hot. It's bright. That's fire.
That's
You know,
right.
it's just,
There it
ridiculous.
is. Yeah, there you go.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah. Anyone else on this subject?
Robert, is your hand up again, or did you not?
No, I lowered it, or
Yeah.
I thought I did.
You put it up.
And of course, you know, this extends that idea of, you know, that hydrogen, that the noumenal levels or subjective levels of hydrogen actually form the spiritual basis of the human being. You know, wrap your head around that. Of course, hydrogen is incredibly combustible, or that is where it is present, fuel combusts rapidly. So there's a connection there, you know, but this is not something I remember having read before. This really caught my attention, this idea that the spiritual essence that is noumenal hydrogen, or how hydrogen demonstrates on higher planes.
It implies that even hydrogen isn't hydrogen, you know.
Well, there you go. That's it. You know, that's exactly right. And the same, for the same reasons that we were just you know, talking about, which is, you know, this is what we know as hydrogen is, you know, when you look through God, I don't even know if they've, you know, if they've seen a hydrogen atom, but, you know, they've determined its molecular weight as one, you know, which is itself quite interesting. But that's it. Of course, they don't know they can't know the subjective hydrogen. And so welcome to the form world. You know, this is what it's like to be in this place we're in. Everything is a great illusion. You know, we're seeing the shadow of all of the truth is the subjective truth underlies all form, you know. And of course, you know, we have treatises written on this. So, you know, we have good guides on this in DK and HPB. Okay. Could we get a reader for this next section, please? This is the way we're in the middle of a 4-page long paragraph.
Cindy, can you read that for us, please?
Yes. Now that the conditions and laws ruling our solar system are fully developed, and that the atmosphere of our Earth, as of every other globe, has become, so to say, a crucible of its own, occult science teaches that there is a perpetual exchange taking place in space of molecules or of atoms, rather correlating and thus changing their combining equivalents on every planet. Some men of science and those among the greatest physicists and chemists begin to suspect this fact, which has been known for ages to the occultists. The spectroscope only shows the probable similarity on external evidence of terrestrial and sidereal substance. It is unable to go any farther, or to show whether atoms gravitate towards one another in the same way and under the same conditions as they are supposed to do on our planet, physically and chemically.
Thank you. Okay, so first, this phrase suggests that as far as the elements are concerned, the involutional stage of planetary development through the solar system is complete and stable, resulting in a series of discrete creative planetary environments wherein elements interact in order to develop. DK addresses these, quote, laws ruling our solar system from the perspective of our planetary logos. Could we get a reader for this?
Charles, can you read that for us, please? Well, I'm not seeing him come through, so let me.
There we go. Is that him?
There.
Yes.
Great.
He thus enables his form. The planet, which is the compound of all the 7 kingdoms in nature, to express logoic intention for duration of the great breath. Of this breath, time and space are the 2 aspects. It affects the tiniest atom and the most enabled being within the spheres of his consciousness and the scope of his life, his livingness. It affects the subhuman kingdoms unconsciously to them and is in relation to them, sometimes spoken of as the law of the life of the sun.
Thank you.
Initiation.
Okay. So this reflects the stability that Thomas Stretcher has achieved that is referenced here, right? Has become, so to say, a crucible of its own. Okay. Next, occult science teaches that there is a perpetual exchange taking place in space of molecules, or of atoms rather, correlating and thus changing their combining equivalents on every planet. So after establishing that each planet is a kind of laboratory unto itself, HPB asserts that through the intervening space between atoms, there is an exchange of substance, and then seems to suggest that each planet develops its own quote unquote combining equivalents. As applied to the atom of science, that is, of course, not the case. Modern spectrometry provides consistent data that matter throughout the universe is composed of the same fundamental elements that are found on Earth. However, unique mineral and biological combinations of the elements may occur in other planetary environments. That's a scientific perspective. But an atom in metaphysics is far more than an atom of science. Can we get a reader for this short quote?
Atoms are called vibrations in occultism. The waves and undulations of science are all produced by atoms propelling their molecules into activity from within. Atoms fill the immensity of space, and by their continuous vibration are that motion which keeps the wheels of life perpetually going. It is this inner work that produces the natural phenomena called the correlation of forces. Only at the origin of every such force there stands the conscious guiding noumenon thereof, angel or God, spirit or demon, ruling powers, yet the same.
Okay, the phrase atoms propelling their molecules from within immediately takes us out of physical science and into the realm of metaphysics, as shown in this fragment from a chart found on page 1187 of a treatise on cosmic fire. As we can see here, there's a difference between the substance of the atomic plane, source of molecular substance, shown in the upper chart, and an atom of substance, as shown in the lower chart. Here's we could stay on this chart for the next 30 minutes, but we're just getting a brief overview with this idea. Here's an old commentary description of the destiny of an atom of substance from later in the Secret Doctrine. Could we get a reader, please?
Yes, Martha, can you read that, please? But first, I want to read a comment that Martha typed a little while ago. She says, it is good to stay on this conversational exchange between Francis and Robert to give us the space to take in this enormously important scientific exposition.
I used the wrong preposition. I'm trying.
Oop, you're fine.
Okay, there's a contemplative opportunity to take this, because Robert, thank you for being brave, because we can't find the words to say how important it is, and maybe the best we can do is just have resonance, subjective kinds of resonance with this as really, really important. Not that I could ever say it again. Anyway, here's the reading.
Okay, hang on a second. Just from what you said, you could take, based on what you just said, you could take every sentence of this or every phrase, and it could be a source of a meditation. Atoms are called vibrations in occultism. Well, hey, this is a whole new game, right? And yet how familiar that is when we think of Einstein's comments about, all matter is energy,
Yeah.
And the waves and undulations of science are all produced by atoms propelling their molecules into activity from within. Now there's a meditation in and of itself, etc. Right? It is a shift in perspective for sure.
That's exactly right. And it's exactly right. And it does a different thing to the mind than sort of mystical or spiritual sayings, or it's a whole a shift of attention that's extremely fundamental. And yet
it's the move from mysticism to occultism.
Thank you. That's right. Mm-hmm.
When occultism becomes just as inspiring, just as breathtaking to you, then you're really ready for this. But HPB was, a definitely dyed-in-the-wool occultist.
Well, that was when Robert spoke, and he spoke for us about what we unknown. There's a difference between not knowing and unknowing. And I'm sorry to keep elaborating. It's just so important. What you said about every sentence can be digested and turned into something actually practical. Anyway, I'm sorry to
That's all right, Martha. Go ahead and read, please.
Okay, every form on earth and every speck, atom, in shape strives in its efforts toward self-formation to follow the motto placed for it in the heavenly man. It's the atom's involution and evolution, its external and internal growth and development have all one and the same object. Man, as the, no, let me do that again. Man is the highest physical and ultimate form on this earth. The monad in its absolute totality and awakened condition as the culmination of the divine incarnations on earth.
Okay, so key here is the idea that the an atom's involution and evolution have the same object, the same purpose, which is to become a human being, right? That's, all subhuman kingdoms, that their destiny is to become a human being, even from the point of an atom of substance.
It's the case too, isn't it? Every man does the same thing with hierarchy. It's like a proportional relationship, connection. We are aspiring in the same way.
Yeah, an atom of substance to a man would be like a man to a solar logos would be the relevant comparison.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. Okay, so we might surmise that the perpetual exchange, using her term, that changes an atom's quote unquote combining equivalents is vibratory, not physical, and is deeply conditioned by the environment of the particular planetary logos that atom of substance finds itself. Eventually leading that atom, we may further speculate, towards manifestation as a unit of the human family of that planet, provided that its trajectory of becoming all takes place on a particular planet, right? So again, I'll just say that that its specificity, that HPB is making a point of describing, that each planet has its own unique product in terms of atoms, is that uniqueness comes from its vibratory, not its physical functions or qualities, I should say. Okay, the views in the last half of this passage are somewhat limited by 19th century science, but HPB makes a valid point in saying that spectroscopes are limited to collecting external evidence, and thus, of course, cannot measure non-physical vibratory qualities. Okay, next up. Reader, please.
Yvonne, can you read that, please?
Yes. I'm still trying to figure out E equals mc squared, mass time velocity squared. Why isn't that physical, the velocity or the vibration? Why isn't that physical?
Do we have any physicists among us here? I would be out of my element, so to speak.
I just was trying to understand that. Okay, I'll read this.
Well, all I can tell you is that outside of the equation that, but it is inherent to the equation also, that Einstein has said that all substance is in fact energy, right? All that we think of as matter is in fact energy. Now, somebody with a physics background could better explain that. And I might be able to if I was a little braver, but I'm not going to go there. So, but yeah, he did make that statement. Okay, could you read, please?
Sure. The scale of temperature from the highest degree to the lowest that can be conceived of may be imagined to be one and the same in and for the whole universe. Nevertheless, its properties, other than those of dissociation and reassociation, differ on every planet. And thus, atoms enter into new forms of existence, undreamt of and unrecognizable to physical science. As already expressed in 5 years of theosophy, the essence of cometary matter, for instance, is totally different from any of the chemical or physical characteristics with which the greatest chemists and physicists of the earth are acquainted. And even that matter, during rapid passage through our atmosphere, undergoes a certain change in its nature.
Thank you. So I'm going to have to fall back on the same comments as I made before. Unique mineral and biological combination of the elements may occur in other planetary environments, or from planet to planet. But again, modern spectrometers provide overwhelmingly consistent data that matter throughout the universe, including comets, is composed of the same fundamental elements. The real difference, we might surmise, comes through the vibrational qualities of extraterrestrial substance, or I should say the noumenal qualities, all that stands in a causal relationship to that outer manifestation, which, since that substance is necessarily in alignment with the vibration of its own unique planetary logos and archetype, or cometary logos, is radically different from planet to planet. Okay, and if anybody has any scientific knowledge that could refute what I'm saying, I would welcome it. But in my limited research on this, this is what I found to be true. Okay, next, could we get a reader for this?
Vivian, can you read that, please?
Thus, not alone the elements of our planets, but even those of all its sisters in the solar system, differ as widely from each other in their combinations as from the cosmic elements beyond our solar limits. And the star says, this is again corroborated by the same man of science in the same lecture who quotes Clerk Maxwell saying that the elements are not absolutely homogeneous. He writes, it is difficult to conceive of selection and elimination of intermediate varieties, for where can these eliminated molecules have gone to if, as we have reason to believe, the hydrogen, etc., of the fixed stars is composed of molecules identical in all respects with our own. And he adds, in the first place, we may call in question this absolute molecular identity, since we have hitherto had no means for coming to a conclusion, save the means furnished by the spectroscope, while it is admitted that, for accurately comparing and discriminating the spectra of two bodies, they should be examined under identical states of temperature, pressure, and all other physical conditions. We have certainly seen in the spectrum of the sun rays which we have not been able to identify.
Okay, thank you. So again, modern science confirms that the elements of the periodic table are absolutely homogeneous, in spite of what is said here, right? You have to remember that 19th century science was in many ways in the beginning stages when it came to some of these understandings, some of these doctrines that would later be developed. So they these, the periodic table is absolutely homogeneous. It is uniform, unvarying, and consistent. Though in combination with other elements, they may change when subjected to temperature changes. My opinion is that this physical approach that HPB is putting out here is just the wrong line of approach. For possible differences, let's return to our chart. The quality aspect in most, though not all, of these categories would be different from planet to planet, if for no other reason that they would be demonstrations of a different set of ray influences. Not their chemical makeup, but on the outer plane, but all the noumenal conditioning aspects would in fact be different. So, for instance, the plane devas and elementals through which atomic substance expresses itself would be ruled and thus conditioned by a different group of devas and with a different quality of expression, even if the type of energy and fire remains the same. Any thoughts or questions about this? I mean, sure, it's possible that in a galaxy far, far away, the physical elements vary, but deep space spectroscopy suggests otherwise. Yeah, I saw Robert's hand.
Yeah, Robert's hand is up. I just want to say, this makes sense to me, and something you said just a minute ago, in their environments or in their conditions, in your table. The elements react differently at different temperatures, and given different sets of elements. And the planets themselves are all at different distances from the sun. They're at different temperatures. They react differently. They're radiated differently, so and then of course, as you said, their ray makeup and all of that. It just, to me, this is just such a there are variables within the consistencies. And I really like the way that this has pointed that out. So thank you for that. All right. Sorry, Robert, you have your hand up.
Yeah, can we go back one page? Yeah, before the tabulation.
Oh, before here? I
Um,
don't know what you want.
I'm trying to remember. I think it was the one where it talked about it was the page that talked about the fact that the scales of temperature were different on all the planets. Anyway, we don't need to look at. I guess the point that the reason that science would fight this to the death is because if they accept it, it's going to junk all the concepts of science. Essentially, it's going to turn it upside down and inside out, literally. When there's a news story of something going off to Mars, for example, and making evaluations of matter, et cetera, is that physical science needs everything to be physical. It needs it to be, other planets are just physical in a different way. Whereas occultism says what you were talking about, Francis, which is that all this matter is different. It's reflective of different locations in the Constitution, in the seven planes, et cetera, et cetera. And so if science admits that there's different levels of the physical, then you end up in occultism. And they can't do it. It would be too terrifying and too revealing in a strange way. I'm not saying that they all know the truth and they're conspiring to suppress it, but it just opens up a universe that they feel like they can, right now, they have a handle on, even though they don't really have a handle on.
Yeah, mostly they don't think about it at all, but if it comes up, they're so biased against the possibility that they call it an anomaly or, whatever. There's, there've been plenty of holes punched through. And I'm not really prepared at this point to give examples. But, certainly in psychology, that lead to another set of conclusions that aren't just physically verifiable or physically measurable. But you're pretty tenacious in holding on to that. For instance, DK predicted that by 1975, science would, by and large, accept the fact of the etheric body. And, that didn't happen at all.
Right.
And
the way science sees it, that, for example, it's been very open to the exploration of quantum levels, so theoretically it's able to separate that out. But then they say, well, there's two worlds. There's the world of the little things, and then there's the world of bigger things. In other words, they can't see it as one world because it blows the whole thing sky high.
Yeah, and Einstein struggled to have that theory of everything that would bring the two together, and it's recognized as an inherent problem.
Yeah. And there are a lot of really smart scientists who, if you talk to them personally, they have different attitudes, but it's hard to be a heretic in the world.
Yeah, exactly. Okay.
And we have a comment from Efrosini. She says, actually, I think this is a question. The 4 physical elements are related to the 7th hierarchy of basket of nourishment or the blinded lives. And then she says how the Davic evolution, which constitutes substance and matter, is connected with atoms.
Yeah, well, first of all, gross or dense physical is an accretion onto the etheric. So all units of consciousness, whether an atom of substance or a Dhyani Chohan, have an etheric body. And if they, well, this wouldn't be true with the Dhyani Chohan, but all beings that incarnate have an etheric body, and then the substance accretes to that etheric body. That's the little elementals that belong to those lowest levels, both the etheric body itself and the dense physical represent the lowest hierarchy, the 7th hierarchy, manifested hierarchy, and one beneath that is not even identified as a hierarchy, right? So in terms of the quality of the substance, you very quickly graduate out of the visible, like at the very first stage. So all the many levels of reality stand beyond the visible level. And I'm not sure I answered your question. You want to restate it? What do you think?
Efrosini?
I'm fine.
I think she's typing something in there.
Okay.
Oh, she says it's okay.
Okay, I'm not sure. Okay, this last sentence is interesting. We have certainly seen in the spectrum of the sun rays which we have not been able to identify. So, okay, again, are we talking about physical or non-physical? My guess is that any ray that would be measurable has by now been measurable. But addressing the invisible solar rays, DK says, when the term channel or ray of approach is used, it means approach from the center of solar radiation to this periphery. What is encountered during that approach, such as planetary bodies, for instance, will be affected by, and here's where we move off the physical, the Akashic current, the electrical current, or the pranic current in some way. Of course, these three rays of approach are not physically measurable and most certainly carry the qualitative impress of their originating source, in this case, the solar logos. Okay, next up, can we get a reader, please?
Scott, can you read that, please?
Therefore, they cannot be taken as a standard for comparison with the same in other worlds. Each world has its Fohat, who is omnipresent in his own sphere of action. But there are as many Fohats as there are worlds, each varying in power and degree of manifestations. Individual Fohats make one universal collective Fohat, the aspect entity of the one absolute non-entity, which is absolute beingness, Sat. Millions and billions of worlds are produced at every Manvantara, it is said. Therefore, there must be many Fohats, whom we consider as conscious and intelligent forces. This, no doubt, to the disgust of scientific minds. Nevertheless, the cultists, who have good reasons for it, consider all the forces of nature as veritable, though supersensuous, states of matter, and as possible objects of perception to beings endowed with the requisite senses.
Thanks, Scott. Finally, I totally agree. I'm not comfortable being at odds with HPV, but, this whole 19th century sort of nursery level of physics and science in general kind of becomes difficult to deal with sometimes. So there is both a universal and an infinite variety of local Fohats wielded by some Raja Lord, right? For the results relevant to its local purposes. So, you're going to have a plain Raja Lord in this solar system, and in another solar system, it's going to be a different Raja Lord, and the plane makeup that might be different. In both cases, the energy involved is going to be Fohatic, but it's going to be a different type of Fohat, even though ultimately there is all Fohatic force is of one energetic nature. Any thoughts about that? I couldn't find the source of this important quote on the multiplicity of Fohats. Possibly it comes from materials only available to HPB. She cites commentary sometimes that is not published, right? So, these quotes sometimes come and they're the only little bits and pieces of commentary that otherwise is not available. Okay, finally we have, occultists consider all the forces of nature as veritable, though supersensuous states of matter. And as possible objects of perception to beings endowed with the requisite senses. This goes back to the 5 fundamental elements, which are the invisible, that is supersensuous root of the forces of nature, right? Which, takes only can be perceived by beings, quote, endowed with the requisite senses. Okay, next up, could we get a reader, please?
Karen, can you read that, please?
Enshrined in their virgin, pristine state within the bosom of the eternal mother, every atom born beyond the threshold of her realm is doomed to incessant differentiation. The mother sleeps, yet is ever breathing, and every breath sends out into the plane of manifestation her protean products, which, carried on by the wave of the efflux, are scattered by Fohat and driven toward and beyond this to another planetary atmosphere. Once caught by the latter, the atom is lost. Its pristine purity is gone forever, unless fate disassociates it by leading it to a current of efflux, an occult term meaning quite a different process from that which the ordinary term implies, when it may be carried once more to the borderland where it had perished, and taking its flight not into space above, but into space within, it will be brought under a state of differential equilibrium and happily reabsorbed.
Thank you, Karen. Okay, so first up, enshrined in their virgin, pristine state within the bosom of the eternal mother, every atom born beyond the threshold of her realm is doomed to incessant differentiations. Beautiful prose. The bosom of the eternal mother stands within the ring past naught, beyond time and space, therefore beyond all differentiation. In truth, manifestation compels all atoms, not just the unlucky ones, right? From the Dhyani Chohans to the atoms of substance, to go forth, both from their father's house, pure spirit, and from their mother's bosom, the nursery of noumenal substance. Next, the mother sleeps, yet is ever breathing, and every breath sends out into the plane of manifestation her protean products. Protean means ever changing. The breath and the word are closely allied. Earlier in the Secret Doctrine, HPB tells us the logos, which is itself the seven-vowed sign, is the breath crystallized into the word. So that relationship between word and breath, this sort of defines that relationship. Next, which carried on by the wave of efflux, are scattered by Fohat and driven toward and beyond this or another planetary atmosphere. Efflux means that which flows out. On the involutionary arc, Fohat, quote, hardens and scatters the seven brothers, which means that the primordial electric entity electrifies into life and separates primordial stuff or pre-genetic matter into atom, themselves the source of all life and consciousness. It's a really good description of Fohat here. Next, once caught by the latter, the atom is lost. Its pristine purity is gone forever. Okay, so once caught by Fohat, the atom, which in our solar system belongs to one of seven hierarchies, and so could be anything from an atom of substance to a great Dhyani Chohan, is formed by Fohat into a discrete unit and is thus cut off from unity with the mother principle, from oneness with the shining substance of the divine mother. This quote unquote hardening of the atoms and its subsequent protracted fall into matter removes it from the pristine purity of the spirit-infused causal planes. Next, unless fate dissociates it by leading it to a current of efflux, an occult term meaning quite a different process from that which the ordinary term implies. Let's take a look at HPB's comments on the term current of efflux from the Secret Doctrine dialogues. Could we get a reader for this dialogue, please?
Kirsten, can you read that for us, please?
Mr. B. Kitely, question 3, page 143, line 10.
So that's where we are. That's literally referencing the current of efflux that we've been using. Go ahead.
Okay. Can you explain at all what is meant by current of efflux? Madame Blavatsky, in physical science, a current of efflux is a current of matter on one and the same plane, whatever its attraction. In occult science, a current of efflux means a current passing from one plane to another, whether higher or lower. This efflux is not an objective movement in our third dimensional space, but a change of state from space without to space within, or vice versa. To understand that, you see, in occult language, it means quite a different thing.
Yeah, thank you. Any thoughts about this? There's yeah, Robert, I see your hand. Sorry, Bia.
Oh, hold on a minute, Robert. Efrosini says this continuous differentiation and specialization of initially similar atoms reminds me of the differentiation of fetal cells during gestation.
Yeah, and I bet you they're related, yeah, I bet. Because it's, after all, those fetal cells are adapting themselves to manifestation. Yeah, and I appreciate that.
Go ahead, Robert. Robert, were you going to say something?
Yeah, I was babbling on, muted in my own universe. The phrase on this page and then the one before it, this passing from one plane to another, whether higher or lower. That's kind of what I was saying about like a trip to Mars. It's not just from one physical part of a plane to the same part, as science would, describe it. And the whole thing on the last page, can we go back to one page, is like in the second half of the page, it says it's a beautiful allegory almost to the journey of the soul in terms of its fall, and where at the end, she uses the word, it will be brought under a state of differential equilibrium and happily reabsorbed. It's the fall of the soul, of consciousness, to another level, and then it's reabsorption after that, its own journey.
Yeah, you could describe our process of becoming, of return or re-identification with the soul as moving on a current of efflux. I haven't that way, but according to her definition here in the dialogues, that's exactly what it would be. It's really interesting. In Hinduism, there's actually a entity, a bird called Garuda, that represents this concept. In other words, the specialty of this bird is to move from plane to plane, right? It's like this inner flight, so to speak, right? And there's one of the gods,
Krishna flies on that, that's his vehicle of movement.
Yeah, so it's his way of coming into another plane of existence. That's
great. Yeah, I really like that.
Right. It's a wonderful metaphor for this concept, right? Which is called current of efflux, right?
Good name for a rock band too.
Yeah, wouldn't it be? But it'd have to be really good stuff. you'd have to be able to transcend in your music, or you wouldn't deserve the name. Okay, where are we here? So yeah, that's where we're. Okay, so next, when it may be carried once more to the borderland where it had perished and taking its flight, not into space above, but into space within, it will be brought under a state of differential equilibrium and happily reabsorbed. So we're talking about these atoms of substance that somehow are able to avoid reincarnation or that process, and then are led by this current of efflux back. So there is one other instance of the term differential equilibrium that occurs here, right? This where was I? When it may be carried. All right, guys, sometimes the technical inserts itself. When it be carried once more, I'm not finding that slide of the lowest. Okay, anyway, where it says here, it will be brought under a state of differential equilibrium and happily reabsorbed. So there's one other instance of the term differential equilibrium in HPB's writings, quote, and it adds some understanding, that's why I'm using it. All bodies are formed primitively from this higher tenuous ether, animal, vegetable, and mineral, and they are only returned to their high gaseous condition when brought under a state of differential equilibrium. So differential just means depending on or showing difference, right? And suggesting that differential equilibrium means the equilibrating of all differences, of all the pairs of opposites intrinsic to manifestation, a requisite, we're here being told, to reabsorption into the space within. Taken together, this passage suggests that there are atoms or units of consciousness that are able to buck the involutional trend, the will to be of the universal logos. The key phrase here is unless fate dissociates it. Fate is not a term usually found in theosophy. Instead, karma and natural law are considered to be the principles that guide all manifested units of consciousness. But whatever the conditioning force, it releases these atoms from the compelling force of the evolutionary arc or of reincarnation. In my understanding, this could only come from having gone through all the evolutional stages in previous manvantaras. In fact, we know from esoteric astrology that there are hierarchies of beings of such a high degree of consciousness that they do not, in fact, cannot incarnate onto the cosmic physical plane. And true to HPB's idea of matter as an imprisoned state, these hierarchies are described as having reached liberation or on the verge of liberation. Now, I don't believe that there is a random fate that allows certain quote unquote lucky atoms to avoid the plunge into matter. In fact, it is only by means of this great cycle that one becomes self-aware. Any thoughts or questions about this? All righty. Next up, oh, wait a minute. Could we get a reader, please?
Eleanor, can you read that for us, please? You're still muted.
Here I go. Okay. Were a truly learned occultist, alchemist, to write the life and adventures of an atom, he would secure thereby the eternal scorn of the modern chemist, perchance also his subsequent gratitude. However it may be, the breath of the father-mother issues cold and radiant and gets hot and corrupt, to cool once more and be purified in the eternal bosom of the inner space, says the commentary. Man absorbs cold, pure air on the mountaintop and throws it out impure, hot, and transformed. Thus, the higher atmosphere being the mouth and the lower one the lungs of every globe. The man of the planetary breathes only the refuse of mother. Therefore, he is doomed to die on it. Indeed, if such...
Yeah, go ahead.
Oh.
So we're now,
Indeed.
this is his, perchance also his subsequent gratitude. Go ahead.
Indeed, if such an imagery chemist happened to be intuitional and would for a moment step out of the habitual groove of strictly exact science, as the alchemist of old did, he might be repaid for his audacity. He who would
Allotropize.
Okay, sluggish oxygen into ozone to a measure of alchemical activity, reducing it to its pure essence, for which there are means, would discover thereby a substitute for an exhaler of life and prepare it for practical use.
Okay, thank you. So HPB inserts a little levity here while slamming modern science for its narrow and unconsciously biased perspective. But the real substance comes in starting here. The breath of the father-mother issues cold and radiant and gets hot and corrupt to cool once more and be purified in the eternal bosom of inner space, says the commentary. One of the metaphors used to describe causal levels is the absence of heat, even in causal fire. Rule 9 of raised initiations describes the evolutionary passage of a quote unquote band of brothers into progressively higher states of consciousness. Could we get a reader, please?
Martha, can you read that, please?
I'm sorry, yes. Rule 9. For disciples and initiates, let the group know there are no other selves. Let the group know there is no color, only light. And then let darkness take the place of light, hiding all difference, blotting out all form. Then at the place of tension and at that darkest point, let the group see a point of clear, cold fire. And in the fire, right at its very heart, let the one initiator appear whose star shone forth when the door first was passed. Oh my God.
Thank you, Martha. Beautiful, isn't it?
Mm.
So the prerequisite for this journey is shedding the heresy of separation, right? No other selves. And thereby knowing that that all is one. There are no other selves. Then the realm of color is transcended, leaving only light. This is the soul realm. Then the realm of light is left behind, and that darkness, which is the source of light, is entered into. The quality of this darkness hides all difference, which HPB describes as a state of differential equilibrium. Then, yet a further stage is described, a place of tension, and at that darkest point. And it is here that the clear, cold fire of the one initiator appears. So this is the most dramatic example that I know of the steps that lead up to cold fire, into the realm of where heat is no longer a part of the expression.
When you lay this rule onto what we've been talking about, the hermeneutic that she's describing becomes accessible. It ceases to be metaphoric. And yeah, what a great association. Thank you for making this association, Francis.
Yeah. So this rule charts an evolutionary passage into the bosom of inner space, right? Described here, where the hot and corrupt breath of matter is redeemed. Okay, next, the higher atmosphere being the mouth, and the lower one, the lungs of every globe. Yeah, this is really interesting. I think there's probably an association here with the seed Manu. There's two Manus with every globe, but the mouth, all this is metaphorical, breathes the higher atmosphere, right? Which the lungs, source of the out-breath, quote unquote, corrupt. The in-breath draws in spirit and is used in pranayama meditation. We just learned in the TCF webinar series that the logos uses the in-breath to leave his physical expression, consciously in-breathes to pass into abstraction. The out-breath, which HPB calls the lower breath, is the breath on which the word of creation goes forth. In terms of the globes, we can view globes A through the midpoint of D as the outbreath of a great Lord that presides over a particular round. And that same midpoint through globe G as this Lord's in-breath. The 7 root races of any one globe can be viewed in the same way as can the 7 rounds of a chain and the 7 chains of a scheme. All in terms of, see, because following right on the breath is the word. So the out-breath also, what follows on the out-breath is the creative word. You know, the name logos means word. So it's that outgoing word, which is then sustained through during the process of existence. Okay, next, the man of our planet breathes only the refuse of the mother. Therefore, he is doomed to die on it. Well, the refuse of the mother is planetary prana. It is refuse because it is shed by her after absorbing the solar prana. Prana and the etheric body through which it flows is only present during incarnation. Thus, one who breathes planetary prana will at some point disincarnate on that planet. Next, the footnote. He who would allotropize sluggish oxygen into ozone to a measure of alchemical activity, reducing it to its pure essence, for which there are means, would discover thereby a substitute for an elixir of life and prepare it for practical use. Allotropize means to shift from one form in which a particular element exists to another. Let's see, yeah, here's an example of that. But reducing it to its pure essence suggests a further non-physical stage of refinement, like was being described by hydrogen, the higher noumenal essence of hydrogen being essential to our own higher characteristic principles, our own higher principles. A process that is the provenance of alchemy, and which, when accomplished, HPB here suggests would yield a substance akin to the elixir of life. It's a big deal with the alchemists, to create the elixir of life. So all a metaphor for the homeward journey, right? So any thoughts or questions about this? Okay, next we move into HPB's one paragraph commentary on the B section, which references, quote, that's over here. Lastly, 7 small wheels revolving, one giving birth to the other. Remember, she writes all this commentary in reference to sections of the verses. It's easy to lose sight of that. I certainly do. Okay. Could we get a reader, please, for this, please?
Can you read that, please?
The process referred to as the small wheels giving birth, one to the other, takes place in the 6th region from above, and on the plane of the most material world of all in the manifested cosmos. Our terrestrial plane, these 7 wheels are our planetary chains. See commentary Nos 5 and 6. By wheels, the various spheres and centers of force are generally meant, but in this case, they refer to our septenary ring.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, first, and I'm going to repeat this. Process referred to as the small wheels giving birth to one another takes place in the 6th region from above, and on the plane of the most material world of all in the manifested cosmos, our terrestrial plane. Modern theosophy identifies the dense physical plane as the 7th, not the 6th plane counting from above. But when we approach the subject in terms of vehicles, as shown in this chart from de Peruger's Fundamentals of Esoteric Philosophy, we see that there are 6 such vehicles. And this would be true for a planet as well as a human being. Though different in name, this corresponds with DK's teachings, wherein the highest vehicle, the monadic, or the monad, is on the 2nd plane, not the 1st, giving 6 vehicles. And finally, these 7 wheels are our planetary chain. By wheels, the various spheres and centers of forces are generally meant, but in this case, they refer to our septenary ring. The Earth scheme's 4th planetary chain is pictured here, this whole thing. The wheels represent rounds. Each of these wheels are rounds. HPB's note, see commentaries numbers 5 and 6, refers to a long and detailed section that follows her commentary on the next verse. This 40-page section, which we'll be getting into soon enough, inserted between verses 4 and 5 of stanza 6, deals extensively with chains, rounds, globes, root races, and the passage between them. So that's going to be the subject for a while, but not immediately. It'll be a while yet. But for now, having finished HPB's commentary on, well, actually, I should ask, do you have any questions about this? Actually, it's going to be explained more when I go through the verse. And that's a perfect time to stop, isn't it? Okay, so next time we'll start by taking a look at the verse itself, in going through each part of the verse and extrapolating meaning that HPB might not have addressed. So that's going to be it for today. Any final thoughts or questions? I'm just looking at the chat box now. Yeah. Biel brought up most of this. Okay, you want to give, well, I'll just start by saying this Friday is the 4th session of Treatise on Cosmic Fire. It's going real well. If you haven't been involved and you can handle this material, you can certainly handle that material. So it's just another perspective, often handling, and I've seen a lot of crossover already between the Secret Doctrine that we look at and the material we look at in a Treatise on Cosmic Fire. So, you would all be most welcome to attend. You can find the link on the MoreFederation.com website. Beyond that, Biel?
Well, our next Secret Doctrine is going to be September 18th at 7 p.m. But before that, we will have a Secret Teaching of All Ages on September 4th at 7 p.m. And as Francis said, on the 2nd and 4th Fridays of each month are the Treatise on Cosmic Fire, and that's at 5 p.m. GMT.
Yeah, 2 hours earlier. All righty. Well, thank you all for attending. This isn't, right now, this isn't particularly easy material to get through, but it's, I think, really important, illuminating material about this quality of the essence of the atoms. So anyway, thank you.
Good night, everybody, or
Bye.
good morning, or wherever you are, whatever time it is. Goodbye.
Bye-bye.
Bye, everybody.